Welcome to the Cycling Demystified podcast, brought to you by Foundation BikeFit and Frequency CycleWorks, the podcast where we help you take your cycling to the next level by sharing the knowledge from experienced bike fitters, mechanics, and the hidden players within the bike industry. All right, and welcome back to one of our bite-sized episodes of the Cycling Demystified podcast. And this week, I had an interesting conversation with one of our riders and thought I'd delve into the three key aims we have when it comes to sizing a new bike. And this was born off the back of this conversation where rider was just getting a little bit confused about how to go about this sizing conundrum. And when I say bike sizing, I'm talking about how to select the right size bike for a rider. And what I want to give you today is an insight into the thought processes we go through in order to decide what will be the best size bike for somebody. And we'll probably do a longer episode on the whole process of sizing, like the method that we go through and the fundamentals within that, because it's a pretty big topic and that will inevitably lead us down some pretty big rabbit holes as well. But I wanted to keep this episode a bit shorter and sweet today so you can understand the context around what we're trying to achieve through a bike sizing process. And once you have the idea or the framework in the back of your mind, it's like having a plan. If you don't have a plan, it's hard to ensure that you're making the right decisions. But with a plan, it's much easier to make good choices. So if you're unsure about what size of bike you should be buying, or maybe you're unsure that your current bike is the right size for you, then listen on, this is for you. So going back to our rider that I was having a chat with this week, she had been in for a bike fit with us previously on her existing bike, and we had made that position as good as we could do. So now she's in the market for buying a new bike, but was just getting a little bit confused as to how to use her measurements to inform that new bike purchase. How do I actually use what I've got so that I can buy the right bike? And her initial thoughts were that her current bike was a size medium and it fitted her well and she got good on the bike. So couldn't she just go out and simply buy another size medium and it would be just right for her? And I said no and had to go through this kind of explanation. So I wanted to do the same thing for you guys so that you also have the right context, the right framework as to go about looking at different bikes, because it is pretty confusing out there. And why aren't all mediums the same? And some bike manufacturers don't even use medium. They call their bikes medium large, or they actually start using numerical formats like 54 centimeters or a 53 centimeters. And so what is this the same as? How do you compare? Is a 53 the same as a medium, or is a 57 the same as a medium? So yeah, welcome to the confusing world of bikes. This is confusing for even people within the industry. And I think a lot of this, I have to kind of go into a little bit of history to give some context. And sadly, the old conventions of naming the size of a bike based on a specific dimension, usually this will be based on the seat tube length, just doesn't really work anymore. These kind of numbers that we get, if you see a bike which is numbered or sized numerically, usually say like 50, 52, 54, 56, 58 in sequence. This is a historic convention when bikes were kind of simpler shapes. They were kind of double diamonds or triangles with horizontal top tubes, and the sizes were based on the length of the seat tube, usually measured from the middle of the bottom bracket, so where the axle or where the crank's attached to the bike, the middle of that bottom bracket, measured along the length of the seat tube, so the tube that runs up from the bottom bracket to where the seat post would attach. So if you measured from the middle of that bottom bracket up to the top of the seat tube, or sometimes the middle of that kind of seat tube junction where it meets the top tube, then that will give you your size. And since the majority of bikes back in, say, up until like the 1990s were still this kind of shape, and the construction of bikes was basically kind of steel or aluminium, and they were all kind of this horizontal top tube shape, then the convention of sizing and naming sizes based on this dimension worked pretty well. Bar a few idiosyncrasies. Italian bikes tend to be named in odd numbers. Other bikes were named in even numbers. But essentially, most bikes were comparable through this measurement. All this changed when Giant introduced the modern bike with a sloping top tube. So instead of a horizontal top tube, the top tube would drop lower. And so this changed the length of the seat tube, even though the size of the bike, air quotes, size of the bike was the same. The shape of that triangle of the bike was different. So it's much more difficult then to use that same measuring convention. Combined with the fact that Giant also had the aim of reducing the number of available bike sizes for the ease of manufacturing at scale. So instead of, say, offering 10 different frame sizes in 2 centimeter increments, then they just offered a small, medium, and large. They didn't even number it, they just called it small, medium, and large. And from their perspective, it's much easier to only measure 3 different sizes and then change the components to kind of match the rider. And it's also easier for riders when there is limited choice in sizes. So either buy the small, medium, and large, and you don't have to think too much about what works better for you. Anyway, so this is a roundabout way of saying that the sizing labels that you see on bikes these days are not comparable, and they're not such a useful reference point just because the shape of bikes have changed so much. And these old kind of reference points just don't work. So it's a bit like when you go and buy a pair of shoes, for example. If you go and buy a pair of Nike size 42s, it's going to feel and fit differently to a pair of Adidas in size 42. Same applies with clothes, and even within components. Like, so if you buy a saddle and one width is 143 millimeters, and this will not feel the same as another 143 millimeter width saddle, because they're just different shapes. And so if we're looking to buy a new bike, looking for a different size, then we need a different way of comparing different bikes. And the new method is the new method to do this is known as using frame stack and frame reach. So these are 2 different dimensions. And I'm not going to delve any further into this because we touched on it in previous episodes. I'll put a link in the episode, and it really deserves a standalone episode itself. So we'll talk more about stack and reach in a separate episode, but I'll leave a link in the description where you can read more into stack and reach, because it is a fundamental thing that you need to understand if you want to compare different bike sizes. And once you understand it, then it becomes so much easier. So definitely worth looking into, but I'll put that link in the description below. But the real point I'm trying to make is that it's not your fault that bike sizing feels confusing. It just is at the moment. Even for folks within the industry, comparing and sizing bikes is a bit of a minefield, which is why actually we advocate so strongly for getting a bike fit before you buy a new bike, so that you are armed with the right knowledge and the measurements and the methods, so that you can make the best decisions for you, rather than, say, by being blindsided by a sales rep or being overwhelmed by seemingly endless choice. Actually, you can narrow everything down pretty easily and quickly if you have the right method. But even if you're looking at sizing guides which manufacturers provide on their websites, which is mostly based on a height measurement, you'll probably find that you fall between sizes, which again is actually also true, but also confusing. And the truth is that as a bike fitter, I can usually make 2 or different sizes of bike actually work for a rider. Now, I use the word work loosely, but essentially what we're trying to get at is that by changing components like stem length, bar width, crank length, I can usually create the same position across 2 or 3 different bike sizes. So then that begs the question, which is the right size for you? Is there just one right size? Or maybe are all 3 the right size for you? How do we decide? And this brings us on to the 3 fundamentals that we will try to achieve in our bike sizing sessions. Now, this might be specific to us at Foundation Bike Fit, but I'm pretty sure most bike fitters will be kind of leaning into these kind of 3 fundamentals. So yeah, let's get into it. Firstly, and obviously, we need to make sure that the bike that we choose is, or the bike size that we choose, it's able to create a great riding position, i.e. the components and the frame size must be adjustable enough to create the right saddle position, the right handlebar position, the right foot position for you specifically, and for your specific riding goal. And this is essentially what bike fit is. This is what every bike fit is trying to achieve. So first of all, the bike's got to fit in that way. Secondly, a well-sized bike not only has to fit well, but it has to ride well. Unless you're just riding indoors. If you're a Zwift rider, or I don't know, just riding on a Peloton indoors, then yeah, we don't need the bike to handle well because it's never going to go outside. But the majority of you guys listening will be riding outside, and never forget that, you need your bike to ride well outside. And what does this mean? What does riding well mean? Well, this means that a rider's weight distribution needs to be considered. And how does this affect how the bike feels and handles? Is it predictable? Is it nervous? Is it unbalanced? Is it working with you? And additionally, all the component sizes that need to go onto the bike need to also ensure that the bike will handle well. So this is the key point. Everything points towards the bike needing to do a job outside, out on the real world, and is it working with you? Now, bikes are designed to work well within certain parameters. So if you stray outside of those parameters, you need to understand what effect this will have on steering and balance. And a common generalization is if we install, say, like a very short stem, say 40 millimeters long, the steering of the bike will become very fast or twitchy. And the opposite is true. So if you put a very long stem on a bike, talking general terms, 140 millimeter long stem will steer much more slowly. And so bikes will kind of make use of these kind of steering properties. Like modern mountain bikes are designed specifically to be used with a very short stem, say 40, 50 millimeters, to improve that kind of steering component. But if you put a 40 millimeter stem on a road bike, it's going to feel terrible, and it's just not going to ride very well. So we have to consider how bikes are designed. And although you can create the same position or a good position on several different sizes of bike, i.e. one where your body is able to work biomechanically at its best, one size of bike may actually produce the best handling bike, as well as a bike that fits really well. And the emphasis is on here your specific riding goals. This is where one size may work better for one discipline or outcome than another. And maybe if you have a different riding goal, then a different size might actually be a better choice. And this is where consulting an expert can be super useful to help you understand the nuances of your choices. So going back to, first fundamental was obviously getting a bike that fits well and allows your body to work biomechanically well. And the second is to make sure that the bike handles well. And finally, what we like to consider in our bike fittings and bike sizings is how to future-proof your bike. And this usually comes in the form of building in some adjustability into the bike, e.g. having a couple of spaces under the stem or over the stem so you can raise or lower the handlebars. In general, just making sure that all your component sizes are within the middle of the component ranges so that you can change your position in the future if you want to. And firstly, it's possible to change your position, and secondly, changing the components won't adversely affect the handling of the bike. If you, change the stem length 10 millimeters, hopefully that really won't make a really big difference to the handling of the bike. And of course, you can choose to have your components installed at one extreme of the adjustments, like having a stem slammed for that kind of low aesthetic or racy aesthetic, or fitting an unadjustable integrated handlebar for the clean look and aerodynamics. But you should do this knowing the consequences of your choices. For example, like integrated bars are a great race for a racing setup, where you're unlikely to change your position much, and you're looking for maximum performance, both in terms of aerodynamics and stiffness and so on. But if you're buying a bike, say just like one bike that it has to do a little bit of everything, it's your kind of commute bike and your kind of leisure bike at the weekend and so on, then having some adjustment is probably a good thing. So just be cognizant of what you're buying. Like, does it have that adjustment, and is that important for you? So there you have it. Those are the 3 fundamentals we need to consider and explore through every bike sizing session, namely making sure you can get a good bike fit on it. Your bike that you're going to get is going to handle in the way that you want it to. It's going to steer well. It's going to be balanced. And also, does it have the adjustability that you need for your riding goals? And once you understand these 3 things, then you can make the best informed decisions about which is the right bike size for you. And if you're looking at your bike right now and you have your stem angled upwards, or you've got 50 millimeters spaces under the stem, or your saddle is slammed back as far as it will go on the rails, and assuming that you feel pretty good on the bike, then all these adjustments might be just signs that you could actually be on a better bike. So yeah, have a look at your bike. Have a look, see what it could be. And yeah, if in doubt, always consult your local bike fitter, your cycling expert, or send us your questions. We love hearing from you guys. Always got good questions. And yeah, just understand what you are buying. It's just far too easy these days just to, at a click of a button, spend 10 grand on a super bike, and it just doesn't work for you, either in the fit department, or it doesn't have the adjustability that you're looking for, or it just doesn't ride in the way you want it to. And that ride might not be because of the tire pressure you put in. It might be just where your weight distribution is on the bike. So hope this has been useful, and yeah, as always, any questions, send us your questions, and catch you on the next one. Ta!
Suffering from numb hands, tingling toes, and any other persistent discomforts when you ride? These are all signs that your bike fit could be improved. If you're bike fit curious, get in touch with Wei or Matt by emailing info@foundation.fit or finding them on Instagram @FDN_bikefit. Finally, for all your bike servicing needs, custom dream bike or hand-built wheels, go to www.frequencycycleworks.com or find me on Instagram @frequencycycleworks. Until next time, keep on spinning.